After my death, Rachel, the serial killer who had terrorized the entire country, was finally captured. But she was cunning beyond belief. Every year, she would confess to a new, unsolved murder just to delay her execution. Because each confession turned out to be chillingly true, her case was constantly re-examined, driving the public's fury to an absolute boiling point. Until the 8th year, just when everyone believed Rachel had finally run out of secrets, she dropped another bombshell. For years, you have all been begging me to reveal where Lucas is. Well, I can tell you now, he is dead. I killed him. Absurd. My sister, the lead prosecutor on the case, immediately fired back. Lucas was jealous of his adopted brother. He hired you to kill him, and when the hit failed and you were caught, he fled the country with millions in family assets. He is still a fugitive. How could he possibly be dead? Rachel looked up, her single good eye glinting as she let out a mocking laugh. Someone did hire me back then, but it wasn't him. And the target? It was him. Don't believe me? The criminal profiler who helped catch me. Wasn't she his fiancé? Bring her here. Let's see if she can drag the truth out of me so you can finally close this file. A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom, every eye locking onto my sister, Abigail. I was hovering just behind the prosecution bench, barely half a foot away from her. I could feel the sudden, suffocating catch in her throat. When my breath left me 8 years ago, my consciousness did not fade. Instead, a strange, invisible force anchored me to the people I had once loved most. I had watched Evelyn write countless psychological analyses of me on her whiteboard after I vanished, ultimately concluding that I had a strong motive and the capability to commit the crime. I had watched Abigail build the prosecution's case, declaring that my jealousy of Thomas had driven me to pay an assassin to put an end to him. Our parents could not survive the devastating blow. They collapsed, hospitalized with strokes, and never woke up again. After their joint funeral, Abigail wiped my name from the family records, erasing my existence like a stain. From that day on, Thomas became the only son, the only brother left in the family. 2 years later, carrying the legacy and wealth that should have been mine, he married Evelyn in a lavish wedding. Every single milestone of their lives tore through my spectral soul. In the courtroom, Abigail's hand trembled, her pen pausing over the legal pad. She stared at Rachel for a long, quiet moment. The evidence in this case is ironclad, and over 7 appeals, the courts have consistently ruled that Lucas fled the country after orchestrating a murder-for-hire plot. Your fabrications are nothing but a desperate attempt to delay your execution. The prosecution requests a recess. The judge slammed the gavel. Abigail packed her files and walked out without looking back. I followed her out of the courthouse, drifting all the way to the cemetery. Standing before our parents' headstone were Evelyn and Thomas, their fingers tightly intertwined. Hearing footsteps, Evelyn turned around, her voice raspy. Did she talk? Did she say where Lucas is hiding? Abigail shook her head, her face grim. She claims Lucas died 8 years ago. She says she killed him. That's impossible. It's ridiculous. Thomas interrupted, his voice cracking with defensive anger. If Lucas is dead, who hired her to kill me? Who emptied our family's bank accounts? If he hadn't committed those atrocities, Mom and Dad wouldn't have suffered those fatal strokes. They died within a month because of him. They loved him so much, yet he didn't even show up to their funerals. He took the money and hid like a coward. 8 years, and not a single word. He grew increasingly hysterical, clutching his chest as if the grief were too much to bear. Evelyn wrapped her arms around him, soothing him with gentle whispers. Don't cry, Thomas. Abigail, and I would never believe her lies. Lucas committed those crimes. Even if he and Rachel collaborated on this story, the truth cannot be rewritten. I floated right in front of her, watching the utter hatred burning in the eyes of the woman who had once promised to love me forever. My soul felt drenched in ice. During our happiest years, Evelyn had held my hand, swearing she would always stand by me. Yet she was the one who drew up the criminal profile that branded me a monster. I wanted to scream that I was innocent, but no sound came. Abigail looked down at the gravestone, her expression conflicted. I also believe Rachel is lying. She uses these confessions to buy time. But this time, she specifically asked to see the profiler who drafted Lucas's profile. She wants you to judge if she's telling the truth. Evelyn's eyes flickered, but she remained silent. Thomas reached out, gently supporting her slightly protruding pregnant belly. Evelyn, don't go. Your third trimester has been so difficult, and you haven't been sleeping. Let me look after you. Don't waste your energy on a lunatic." Evelyn looked at him, torn, but ultimately shook her head. "No, I have to see her. For 8 years, we've lived in the shadow. Whether Lucas is alive or dead, I need to know where he is." That evening, in the high-security visitation room, the moment she saw Evelyn, Rachel's lips curled into a sickening grin. "Well, if it isn't the brilliant profiler. I've heard so much about you." Evelyn sat down, her gaze icy. "Lies won't save you. Tell me where Lucas is." Rachel leaned back, chuckling. "What's the rush? We have plenty of time. That profile you wrote for Lucas, it was a masterpiece. Even I believed he was the killer when I read it." She paused, her tone turning mocking. "But it's a pity. A top-tier profiler like you couldn't even see through the man you claimed to love. The monster you described cried like a baby before he died. He lost all his dignity, kneeling in the dirt, begging me to spare his life." Rachel seemed to lose herself in the memory, mimicking my terror with dramatic gestures. "Please don't kill me. I have a family who loves me, and a fiancé I'm supposed to marry. She's 3 months pregnant with our baby. Please, I'll give you everything. Just let me live." Hearing her mimic my dying pleas in that high-pitched, mocking voice, my spectral form convulsed with agonizing pain. The memories of that dark basement and the smell of my own blood rushed back. I screamed in silence, hiding my face. Evelyn flinched, suddenly looking toward the empty space where my spirit hovered, as if she had felt a sudden chill. The next second, she slammed her hand onto the table. "Enough! Shut up! Why should I?" Rachel laughed harder. "Don't you want to know how he died? I stabbed him 43 times, carefully avoiding his vital organs. I wanted him to bleed out slowly, to feel his life draining away. The boy who loved you so much crawled on the floor, clutching his stomach, begging for a savior who never came. In the end, he just stared at the ceiling, weeping until his eyes ran dry of blood, and then he stopped breathing. I told you to shut up," Evelyn roared, her voice cracking. "You can't manipulate me with these sick fantasies. Lucas is alive. And as for my pregnancy back then, it was a false alarm. You can't shake my resolve." Rachel's eyes turned mocking. "Are you trying to convince me? Or are you just trying to quiet the guilt in your own heart?" She dragged a piece of paper and a pen toward herself, scribbling rapidly. Then, she slid the paper across the table and closed her eyes. "I've said my piece. Let's see if the brilliant profiler can crack this puzzle." Evelyn looked at the paper. It was covered in strange, twisted lines that resembled neither letters nor symbols. Before she could demand an explanation, the guards entered and led Rachel away. Evelyn sat frozen, staring at the paper until Abigail and Thomas walked into the room. "Evelyn, are you okay? What did she say?" Thomas hurried to her side, looking at the paper. "What is this? It's just scribbles. We shouldn't let a lunatic waste our time and ruin the department's credibility." Before anyone could stop him, he snatched the paper and tore it into shreds. The officers in the room gasped. "Thomas, that was potential evidence. We could have analyzed or reconstructed it." Thomas ignored them, turning to Abigail with tears in his eyes. "Abigail, please don't dig into this. Rachel is a psychopath. If she keeps spouting these lies, it's only going to hurt us, the real victims. 8 years ago, to save me, you took 3 stab wounds from Rachel. You were in the hospital for 3 months, and the doctor said you almost didn't make it. I don't want you to suffer anymore. Lucas already destroyed our family once. Are we going to let him do it again through her?" Looking at his tearful, protective face, Abigail's resolve crumbled. Thomas is right. Rachel is just playing games to stall her execution. Maintain the original verdict. No further investigations will be opened. Anyone who pries into this privately will face disciplinary action. The officers nodded and filed out. My heart sank into an abyss of cold despair. My own sister had just closed the door on the truth. But then Evelyn spoke up. "I have some paperwork to finish at the office. Abigail, please take Thomas home first." As she spoke, she adjusted her glasses, a tiny habit she only did when she was hiding something. Only I noticed. I followed her back to her private office. She locked the door, rushed to the bottom drawer of her filing cabinet, and pulled out the old dusty file on my case. She grabbed a fresh sheet of paper, closed her eyes, and with a few precise strokes, recreated Rachel's sketch perfectly from memory. Her spatial memory was flawless. She compared the sketch with the old street maps of the city. Just as she was on the verge of making a breakthrough, her phone rang. It was Abigail. Evelyn, Thomas is in terrible shape. The stress of today's events has triggered his panic attacks, and it's putting her pregnancy at risk. He is hyperventilating and losing consciousness. I'm driving him to the hospital right now. Get here quickly. Evelyn rushed out, leaving the files scattered on her desk. I followed her to the hospital. In the private room, Thomas looked pale and fragile. The moment he saw Evelyn, he threw his arms around her. Evelyn, you're finally here. I dreamed of Rachel. She was chasing me with a knife. I ran, but there was nowhere to hide. I'm so scared. For 8 years, I haven't had a single peaceful night. As long as she's alive, the nightmare will never end. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Evelyn held him, whispering comforts, but he kept sobbing. Abigail stood by the window, her expression grim. The doctor says your pregnancy is highly unstable due to the sheer stress Thomas's episodes are causing you. If this keeps up, you and the baby will both be in danger. She gritted her teeth. Lucas, you are truly heartless. Even after 8 years, you won't let Thomas go. You're using Rachel to destroy him. She stormed out of the room. Where are you going? Evelyn called out. To the courthouse. I will demand the immediate authorization of Rachel's death penalty. She won't have another day to terrorize this family. Thomas gradually calmed down. But then, Evelyn's phone rang. It was her colleague. Evelyn, your office just caught fire. We put it out quickly, but many files were destroyed. You should come check. The files of my case were ancient and unique. There were no digital backups. Before Evelyn could leave, Thomas clutched her sleeve, begging her to stay. And once again, she prioritized him. I watched her sit by his bed until he fell asleep. My ghostly heart, which I thought could no longer feel, broke all over again. By the time she left the hospital, it was dawn. Abigail called her. Under my pressure, Rachel's execution has been fast-tracked. It will take place at 10 this morning. Evelyn was stunned. So soon? For Thomas's sake, she cannot live another day. Evelyn was silent, then hung up. But right before she did, Abigail added, Evelyn, I dreamed of Lucas last night. He was just a small, timid boy, the way he was when we first brought him home from the orphanage. He would save a piece of candy in his pocket for weeks, but for my birthday, he spent all his savings to buy me those high-heeled shoes I had only mentioned once. I keep wondering, how did such a sweet boy become a monster? She hung up. Evelyn stood frozen at the green light until the cars behind her honked. When she reached her office, the desk where my files had been was reduced to ashes. She collapsed to her knees. Am I too late? Then, she remembered the pattern. She dipped her finger in the soot and drew it on the floor. She pulled out her phone and opened the old geographical maps of the city from 8 years ago, overlaying the twisted lines onto the old grid. The intersection matched a massive, abandoned construction site that had been derelict for a decade. She drove there immediately. The concrete structure was decaying, steel rods rusting in the open air. Evelyn searched the dark basement with a flashlight, room by room, until she found a hidden chamber. Inside was a dusty crate. She opened it to find rows of videotapes, each labeled with a date. She recognized the dates. They were the active dates of Rachel's victims. Her hands shook as she found the tape with my disappearance date. She started the old generator, popped the tape into the dusty player, and the screen flickered to life. Before the image even cleared, a desperate, sobbing voice echoed through the concrete room. Please, please don't kill me. I have people I love. I haven't even said goodbye to her. I don't want to die here. It was my voice. Evelyn's face turned white as a sheet. The flickering CRT monitor cast a ghostly blue light over Evelyn's horrified face. On screen, the camera angle was fixed, looking down into a damp, concrete cell. There I was, 8 years younger, bound to a heavy metal chair, my face bruised and bloodied. Beside the screen, my spectral self could only watch as Evelyn clutched her pregnant stomach, her breath hitching in her throat. She was a master profiler, trained to spot the slightest micro-expression of deception. But there was no deception here. The raw, primal terror in my eyes on that screen was undeniably real. Look at the camera, Lucas. Rachel's voice echoed from the tape, chillingly calm. She stepped into the frame, holding a long, rusted blade. Tell your beautiful fiancée how much you love her. On the tape, I wept, my voice breaking. Evelyn, I didn't do it. I didn't touch the money. Thomas set me up. He brought her to me. Please, Evelyn, save me. Before the taped version of myself could finish, Rachel's blade drove into my shoulder. The scream that ripped from my throat 8 years ago echoed through the abandoned basement, causing the living Evelyn to stumble backward, knocking over a stack of rusted cans. No, 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 Evelyn whispered, tears finally streaming down her face, washing away years of calculated certainty. She watched in absolute horror as the video played out, confirming Rachel's boast. 43 stab wounds. Slow. Methodical. It took hours. The tape recorded the exact moment the light left my eyes, staring blankly at the ceiling, the very ceiling I had been tethered to in agony for nearly a decade. But it was what happened after my death on the tape that made Evelyn's blood run cold. The basement door on the screen opened. A man walked in. He didn't look at my corpse with horror. He looked at it with relief. He handed Rachel a thick duffel bag, the family assets. The camera caught his face perfectly under the harsh fluorescent bulb. It was Thomas. Is the digital trail clean? Thomas asked the serial killer on the tape, his voice completely devoid of the fragile, panicked tone he used at home. Perfectly, Rachel replied, counting the stacks of cash. The IP addresses for the offshore transfers trace back to his laptop. Your sister and your little profiler will think he ran away with the fortune after trying to have you killed. Thomas smiled, a sickening, triumphant grin. Good. He's finally out of my way. Everything is mine. In the present, Evelyn fell to her knees, vomiting from sheer psychological shock. The brilliant profiler, the smartest mind in the department, had spent 8 years sleeping in the bed of the monster who had slaughtered the man she actually loved. She had carried his child, comforted his fake panic attacks, and ruined my memory. Lucas. She sobbed, pressing her hands against the dusty floor, right where my body had once lay. What have I done? What have we done to you? I floated beside her, weeping tears that could not fall. For the first time in 8 years she knew, but the clock was ticking. Evelyn checked her watch. It was 9:15 a.m. Abigail was fast-tracking Rachel's execution. In 45 minutes, the only living witness to my innocence would be silenced forever, and Thomas's secret would be buried in the grave. Panic sparked a sudden, fierce energy in Evelyn. She ripped the videotape out of the player, clutching it to her chest like a shield, and sprinted out of the abandoned construction site. I drifted alongside her car as she pushed the engine to its absolute limit, weaving through the morning traffic of the city. She dialed Abigail's number, her hands shaking violently against the steering wheel. Ring, ring. Abigail, pick up. Please, by God, pick up. Evelyn screamed at the dashboard. The call went to voicemail. Abigail was already inside the execution administrative block, where phones were strictly prohibited. Evelyn slammed the steering wheel in frustration, changing course. She dialed Thomas next. This time, the call connected. Thomas's voice came through, sounding sleepy and perfectly frail. Evelyn? Where are you? My chest feels tight again. Shut up, Thomas, Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a register of pure, lethal ice. There was a sudden silence on the other end of the line. Evelyn? What's wrong? I'm at the old construction site on 4th Street, she lied, her eyes fixed on the road leading to the prison. I found a box. I found the tapes, Thomas. I know what you gave Rachel. A heavy, suffocating silence stretched over the phone line. The fragile, trembling brother vanished. When Thomas spoke again, his voice was deep, cold, and entirely unbothered. You shouldn't have dug into the ashes, Evelyn. I burned your office for a reason. You killed him. You framing him killed his parents. You took my life, my trust, everything. Evelyn roared, running a red light. And I gained an empire, Thomas replied smoothly. Who are they going to believe, Evelyn? A pregnant, hysterical widow holding a tape that could easily be called a deepfake, or the surviving, traumatized son? Don't bother calling Abigail. I told her I was having another severe attack. She's accelerating the execution right now to protect me. By 10 a.m., Rachel is dead, and the case is legally closed forever. I will destroy you, Evelyn whispered. Good luck, Thomas said and hung up. Evelyn pulled up to the high-security prison gates at 9:42 a.m. She threw her badge at the gate guard. Emergency prosecutorial evidence. Let me through. The prison corridors were suffocatingly sterile. Evelyn sprinted past security checkpoints, her advanced pregnancy making every step a grueling effort. I floated ahead of her, desperately wishing I could throw open the heavy steel doors or manifest a barrier to stop the clock. Inside the execution viewing room, Abigail stood behind the glass. On the other side, Rachel was already strapped to the gurney, the 4 lines connected to her arms. Rachel looked entirely at peace, her single good eye scanning the observation window. When she didn't see Evelyn, a faint, disappointed smirk crossed her lips. The warden looked at Abigail. The governor has signed the fast-track order. We are cleared to proceed, prosecutor. Abigail looked at the glass, her mind flashing back to her dream of the little boy who saved candy for her. She closed her eyes, hardening her heart. Proceed. Stop. Stop the execution. The heavy iron door burst open. Evelyn collapsed into the room, gasping for air, holding the videotape aloft. Abigail turned around, her eyes widening in shock. Evelyn? What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at the hospital with Thomas. The stress. Thomas is a monster.